everyone, Holly Rustick here, and with WeGo Consulting, today we are going to talk about the different types of grants. So we're going to look at federal grants, at state grants, and at foundation grants. Woo. So if you don't really know what to apply for, you kind of think, oh, there's just grants out there, so many thousands of grants out there. Well, you are right, but what kind actually makes sense for your organization? When looking at federal grants, mainly looking at two different types, and those are discretionary or formula grants. So if you're looking at formula grants, just like the word, it's based on a formula. And that's basically where the feds get together and they allocate their budget and they decide where the monies are going to go. And even within this, they know that there's a certain amount of money that they want to have, say, go towards Medicaid. So if your state gets that grant, they're actually going to be spending those monies on that specific purpose. So there's already a formula to it, and there's no competition in that arena for it. And you still might get some of these formula grants because the state might need you as a subrecipient to carry out some of the activities that are mandated by the Fed. See, it's kind of this pass-through funding. And then that way you can, but that's usually when people are, they're more asking you to apply. There's certain types that you can get as a subrecipient, but mainly what you're going to be looking at is discretionary. And just like the word discretionary, that people is more of using your discretion, okay? So using your discretion means you can actually compete for these grants. They are competitive. So that's the basic two big types of federal grants. Yes, there's a couple other ones out there, but those are mainly the ones that you're going to be looking at. And even in that grant, so say a discretionary grant, you can have a regular grant, and that's just what it sounds like, kind of being a regular thing, or you can have a cooperative agreement. And a cooperative agreement is more, sometimes that can be like a research grant, or just any other type of grants, and that's when the federal government is really working side by side with you. So think of that's cooperative. So you're cooperating together, and they may even have to approve your budget first. They may have to approve all your key personnel that you're going to hire. So they're really involved in the process. You may have a lot of webinars that you have to take through the federal government. You might have monthly conference calls with other grantees and with your program manager at the federal level, just to kind of make sure you're on the right track and to make sure that you're reporting. So there's it's a lot of work to do a cooperative agreement, but at the same time, you do get a lot of training. So if you're a new organization, this might be something that you'd be interested in having. But at the same time, you're going to want to get, if this is a good grant, regardless or not if it's regular or cooperative, you're going to want to go after it if it really fits your project. So so those are the different types, and you can definitely see those on grants.gov. And so I'm just going to keep this really brief, but that's basically the main types of federal grants. Now, state grants, you can, once again, formula discretionary. Those are the two different types as well. But one thing to note is that there's also state contracts, and that's great. You can also get federal contracts, but you'll see maybe some more state contracts coming out, and they're still competitive to apply for. And basically the difference between a contract and a grant, well, there's many differences, but the main one is that a contract is actually a legal binding document where a grant isn't. So say if the grant doesn't go through as you thought it was going to go through with your objectives and everything, you may have to pay back money. You may get blacklisted from, like if you don't spend your money properly and all of that, you may have some things. I mean, you definitely want to watch what you're doing. But at the same time, if you don't follow through on a contract, you can go to jail. So it's a different type. I mean, saying that, don't run scared, screaming away from contracts, because contracts are, on some ways, many levels, way easier to manage than grants for the reporting side. But on the other hand, they are legally binding. So when you're looking at different types of funding, just be aware what they entail. And once again, going back to the mindset behind grants on a different podcast that I did, you have to think of this as a partnership. Now, it's just not free money that you're going to get and spend no matter what. You actually have different types of partnerships with different types of grants or contracts. Okay, so now going to foundations. Foundations, they're pretty awesome. Like, talk about like program reporting and all that, it's a lot less than a federal grant, and it usually isn't as thorough either as a federal grant to write. So federal grants can easily be 150 pages with attachments and budgets and logic models and the whole thing, whereas foundations, sometimes they just want a 2-page letter of inquiry. You know, maybe they have 4-page limitation. So it can be in some ways easier to write, but on the other hand, they can be more competitive, and they're a little bit more, they're more I wouldn't say more selective, but it is very interesting to see the different types of foundations. So you have private foundations and public charities. So you just want to look at private foundations. Public charities are when they're asking the public for money to do their thing. It's almost like a hybrid nonprofit, and think of like your local radio stations and, you know, these kind of things, where you're going to be going after private foundation monies, and that's like the insurance companies in your area, or think of like the Ford Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Think of these larger foundations and even smaller ones. Now the large foundations, I will say, yes, they have a lot of money. They're very selective about what they fund, and they have a lot of people applying. So sometimes they don't even take unsolicited offers or, you know, proposals or anything like that. So you really need to look at that as well when you're applying for foundations. One thing I'd say is, yeah, definitely go out into your community and apply for foundations if your project makes sense for what they fund. So say if they fund conservation programs and you have a project you're trying to do for homeless people, now that might not make sense. So you have to really look at, you know, what they actually fund. But on the other hand, if you know some of the board members and you know that they're passionate about what you do as well, I mean, it's worth a talk or conversation to see if that would be something you could apply for, or if they're going to have a funding cycle that has anything to do with what your priorities are. So once again, foundations can be a lot of fun because it is. You need to see if you know people on the board, if you need to know where the location, do they give in your community? Now foundations can be very picky and very precise with what locations they're actually giving. They might just give in a certain county, or, you know, so you really want to look at that instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to apply. I mean, even the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they only accept very specific priority areas, and they say, I mean, it's just, if you go on their website, it's very clear that they usually only give to people that they already know. So, you know, and that's just, it's up to them because it's their money. It's usually private donors or corporations that fund these foundations. So, but what you can do is you can always send people your information. You know, just like, even if you're having an event coming up, send them some tickets to your event. Don't just ask for money, okay? This is a relationship. So going back to that, it's a partnership, it's a relationship. So if you really find some foundations in your area, instead of just approaching them for money, you know, just you just don't do that. That's like kind of saying, will you marry me? When you first meet somebody, don't do that. All right, you want to go ahead and start forming a relationship. Go out on some dates, you know, invite them to things, send them pictures of what you're doing, have them really, you know, personalized, get this information personalized so it's more friendly to them. And, you know, they might not be funding what you're doing, but they may know somebody on another board that is funding different priority areas like yours, and they might recommend you if they have that personal relationship with you, or if they've just seen your stuff a few times and they've been invited to things that you're doing. So you want to go ahead and, you know, and see who else they're funding. Look at the other organizations. So if other organizations are getting grants from them, definitely look at what the organizations are doing differently than you. Do they know people too? Are they doing different is their priority area similar to yours? So you can definitely look at these different things and, you know, find out what other organizations are funding, find out what they're giving. So they might say they give for something, but when you start looking, actually they're giving, you know, different things to different people. So another thing you can do is go on guidestar.com. And you can look at all the foundations there by putting in their name, and you can look through their 990s that they filed. So that is public information, and that's a free service, free website to use, and you can go through and you can actually see who they've given to over the years, for what, and for how much. So that's a really good way of just, researching your foundations to really see, are they doing something, are they giving to similar things that, you might be doing. So you really want to find out what their mission and vision is, and see if your project even aligns with them. It may not. You may think it does, but when you start doing some research, you find out, well, you know what, that really doesn't click. But I see they're giving to these other organizations, and then you go into those organization websites and see where they're getting all of their funding from. They might have that listed, and then you can kind of find some new ideas and new sources. Does this take time? Yes. But will you have a better match than sending out 100 applications to 100 different places that are all the exact same application? You're going to waste your time doing that. I'm going to tell you right now, don't do that. Don't do the one-shot bullseye thinking that you're being productive, because you're not. Take the time to do the research and to really look at the different types of grants that you want to apply for. So whether that be a federal grant, so if you're looking at a discretionary grant, you come across a regular grant or a cooperative agreement, and you really want to apply, do a little digging into the actual funding opportunity announcement and see if you're a really good match for it, if your project is a really good match. You don't want to spend 200 hours of preparing this grant application, among all your team, and then all of a sudden realize that you're not even eligible for it. So you really want to make sure that you know what kinds of grants there are, what they actually prioritize, and then make sure that you're in a place to be competitive in that process and really do the research. So federal grants, discretionary formula, and you want to go after the regular grants or the cooperative agreements. So for state grants, you can go after either one as well, and look at contracts too. Really look at what's going on in your state. And then of course for foundations, you want to go after private foundation funds, not public charities, and really do the research. Do they fund in your location? Do they fund for the priority areas that you're looking at? Do you know anybody on their board? Do you know anyone in their organization? Do you have anything coming up where you can start sending them and just making that relationship, making, here's some tickets to this event, here's this going on, this is what we do, hey, I just want to let you know. That's the way that you can really be more competitive in your funding, and those are the different types of grants and funding out there through the grants. So if you have any more questions on this, please give me an email, hollywego@gmail.com. That's HOLLY WEGO, like we go somewhere, @gmail.com. All right, I'll see you next time.